Hello there. So, I decided to do something. I wanted to share something with you. And this is the first time I've done a live thing, so I'm just trying to make sure that I've got everything right here. But you can see probably right about up here that I am working on a book that's called Light Called My Name. And what I decided I wanted to do to help me stay focused on it and also just to share is I wanted to share some with you. I wanted to read the first chapter to you. So I'm going to do that now, and it's a book about Saul. The Saul who became Paul later. You can probably maybe tell that a little bit from the cover of the book. But it's biblical fiction. It takes the Bible story, but it adds a whole lot more to make a story out of it. So just see if you're interested. Just listen along, and I'm going to read chapter 1 to you. Chapter 1 is called Duty. Jerusalem lay smothered beneath the suffocating dark of a starless sky. In his stone chambers, Saul was already awake, shoulders hunched over the scroll. I'm going to start again because I forgot to do something. So I'm going to start again with chapter 1. So I'm going to start again with chapter 1. We'll take 2 on that. Chapter 1, Duty. Jerusalem lay smothered beneath the suffocating dark of a starless sky. In his stone chamber, Saul was already awake, shoulders hunched over the scroll while the oil lamp sputtered. Its frail flame wavered, barely holding back the shadows that pressed close, greedy for its light. He muttered in frustration, adjusting the wick and pouring in more oil, but the added flame only seemed to deepen the shadows that danced along the walls. The acrid scent of burning oil mingled with the musk of aged parchment, as cruel satisfaction curled his lips. Those followers of the crucified blasphemer would learn soon the cost of defying the law of Moses. They would be dragged from their homes and torn from their families before their corruption could spread further. The children were the hardest. Their cries lingered long after the arrest, echoing in his mind. Yet he steeled himself with conviction. Better they suffer now than be raised in heresy. When the work was done, he would sleep without remorse, certain that he had served both God and the good of Israel. Jesus. That forbidden name, the one he had sworn to blot from the earth, slid into his mind like venom. His jaw clenched until his teeth ached. He spat into the darkness and struck the lamp. It hissed, and the flame shrank to a thin thread, retreating as if in fear of the name. The surge of anger steadied him. He bent over the scroll again, eyes narrowing on the list of names. The infection had spread further than he had realized. There were too many cities and too many converts. Unease pricked the edges of his certainty. What if it was already too late? What if the blasphemy could not be stamped out at all? As the faint glow of the rising sun touched his window, Saul rose and began his morning prayers. Blessed are you, O Lord. You hold authority over all the world. He straightened his shoulders and spoke with a measured cadence of ritual. I have labored in your name. I seek out your enemies. I spread your word and carry out your judgment. A small smile slipped from his lips as he lost himself in the memory of the Sanhedrin's praise the last time he had stood before them. He shook his head quickly, remembering to return to his prayer. God, help me, your humble servant, to do your will, and God, do whatever it takes to stop your enemies in their tracks. He had scarcely breathed his final amen when a sharp rap sounded at the door. Enter. Marcus stepped inside, drawing his cloak close around against the morning chill. Barely 20, he still carried himself with the uncertainty of youth, though months under Saul's command had already carved faint lines of discipline around his eyes. It had not been his choice to serve. His father had insisted. It'll give you a better life than your mother and I have ever known, he'd said. The men are assembled outside. Marcus shifted his weight, his eyes down. But a few have concerns. Saul turned sharply, one brow arched. They have concerns? Marcus took an involuntary step back. Well, my lord, they have questions. Saul's palm slammed against the table. We are doing God's work. We are ridding the world of heresy, and these common soldiers have concerns? Marcus flinched at the sound that echoed sharp against the dark stone walls. For a heartbeat, the room was silent except for Saul's heavy breathing and the soft sputter of the lamp. Then Saul brushed past him and threw open the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the noise of voices and the metallic clatter of armor. Outside, a cluster of men stood in the courtyard, their murmuring cut short at the sight of him. Conversation died mid-word, boots straightened, shoulders squared. Saul stepped forward into the gray morning light, his gaze sweeping over the men. I hear some of you question whether to do God's work. God commands us to rid the world of blasphemy. A voice came from the back, timid but unyielding. But the last time there were children screaming for their fathers and mothers. Does God want that? The question hung in the air. Saul's jaw tightened. Who speaks? No one answered. Boots scuffed the ground. Some coughed. The men stared at their feet. Children grow into the faith of their parents, Saul said. His tone as cold as iron. If the root is poison, the fruit must be cut away before it spreads. His hand felt the hilt of his dagger. If this work offends you, he said, raising his voice for all to hear, then decide now whether you stand with God or against him. The men shifted uneasily, but none spoke. The moment stretched. Then Saul lifted the scroll high, the parchment catching what little light the dawn had. Then we march, he said. Prepare yourself, and may the heretics tremble. A slow clap reached Saul's ears as the men began to bustle around to make their preparations. Spoken like a true defender of the law. The faint toil of the temple shofar echoed in the distance as Eleazar stepped from the archway. His fine robes brushed the dust, and the gold trim of his sash caught the morning light. I was about to embark on an early morning walk and could not help but listen, Eleazar said, smiling. At the last council meeting, the elders spoke your name with admiration. Gamaliel himself said, Saul burns with the fire of Moses. Saul's chest lifted. I only seek to serve God, Rabbi. And you do, Eleazar nodded. When your name was mentioned, the chamber nodded as one. They said, if only all men had Saul's zeal, the blasphemers would already be ash beneath our feet. He clapped Saul on the shoulder. Jerusalem sleeps easier knowing men like you stand guard. He paused. At least, for now. Saul looked up quickly. For now? What do you mean? The rabbi's shrug was slow, almost thoughtful. We've received reports, far more than we expected. In Jericho, entire households have taken up the name of the crucified one. In Caesarea, fishermen refuse to sacrifice before they cast their nets. He frowned. It's already cutting into the temple treasury. Fewer buyers for the offerings means less money to run the temple. He pointed toward the market beyond the courtyard. Even here in Jerusalem, there are whispers of women praying in his name and men refusing to enter the synagogue. The infection spreads, Saul, faster than we can cut it down. Saul looked past him to the waiting soldiers, their armor catching the first dim rays of dawn. Then we must cut deeper, he said. His voice was hardened, cold, and certain. He lifted the scroll high once more and yelled to the waiting men. Today we show no mercy. If the world burns, then let it burn clean. A hush fell. The men exchanged looks, some eager, some hollow. Marcus's fingers bunched on his spear, while a young recruit swallowed hard, eyes wide. Saul tucked the scroll beneath his cloak and lifted his chin, raising his fist into the air. For God! The room exploded with screams as the first line of soldiers crashed through the door. A half-cut piece of bread tumbled from the table, and the jug in Miriam's hand slipped, shattering against the stone floor. Her husband lunged forward, arms wide to shield his family, but he was no match for all of the soldiers. Realization struck her at once. She turned toward her children, voice breaking loudly through the chaos. Whatever happens, remember, Jesus is Lord. Do not repent. Do not deny him. The soldiers moved quickly, grabbing Miriam and her husband, dragging them toward the center of the room. Chains clinked, drowning her cries. At the table, Saul unrolled the scroll and calmly started reading the charges aloud. Blasphemy, false teaching, defiance of the law. But one of the soldiers stopped short, his head cocked, straining to catch a sound beneath the children's screams. His gaze fell to a blanket in the corner. He pulled it back, and a baby's thin wail rose, fragile and piercing above the chaos. The soldier hesitated, glancing toward Miriam. My lord, it's still nursing, he said, his voice trembling. The mother can calm it. At least let her hold the child. The baby's cries sharpened, echoing against the walls. For a moment, no one moved. Even the men gripping Miriam's arms relaxed their grip a little, waiting for Saul's command. But Saul slammed his hand against the table. No mercy, he reminded them, his voice cutting through the noise. The child would be better off not raised by heretics. He motioned to the soldier. Bring the baby and we'll find a nurse for it. The baby was thrust into Saul's arms before he even knew it. Its warmth startled him. Tiny fists clenched at his robe, and the cry deepened into a choking sob. For one breath, the room blurred and Saul wavered. But then he stiffened his resolve and barked out an order. Finish the arrests! Miriam twisted in the soldier's grip as they dragged her toward the door. Orly, she cried, straining to see her eldest through the soldiers. Remember what I told you. Hold to Jesus. Never deny him, no matter what they do. The chains bit her wrist and her sleeve tore. One of the little bronze beads scattered from the hem and rolled across the floor. Orly lunged and caught it, clutching it tight in her fist. I will, Ema, she cried. Enough, Saul snapped, waving the men forward. The chains jerked. Miriam stumbled, still calling her daughter's name. Then through the chaos, Orly's small voice carried, clear and unwavering. Lord, do not hold this sin against them. The soldiers only paused briefly before shrugging and dragging Miriam out the door. But Saul turned toward the girl, stunned. Her words hung heavy in the air, like a ghost from another execution. The room fell into a heavy stillness after the soldiers left. He had passed the baby to Marcos on their way out, and the other children had been ushered from the room, their sobs fading into the street. Now Saul was alone, surrounded by the faint echo of Orly's words. They pounded through his mind like a heartbeat. He pressed his palms to the table, staring at the flickering lamp flame. A chill crept up his spine. Not again. That same defiance, the same unnatural calm in the face of judgment. Why did her words sound so familiar? Why did forgiveness always cut deeper than accusation? In his mind, he drifted back several years. He could still see the dust shimmering in the heat. The crowd was pressed tight around the temple steps, everyone craning to see the spectacle. He had been there, younger then. The man's name was Stephen. The crowd murmured and jeered. Saul had stood watching, jostled by the restless mob. But it hadn't really begun that day. Saul's mind slipped farther back. He remembered the meeting. It was a public gathering with scholars and priests assembled to corner the man. Stephen had stood among them, not proud exactly, but with a strange, radiant certainty. That calm grin had burned itself into Saul's memory. The man spoke of prophecy and the righteous one, as if he had glimpsed heaven itself. The arrogance of it had infuriated Saul. Who was this man to speak as though he knew God? A voice from the crowd had risen. Do you blaspheme the temple? Do you claim authority above Moses himself? Stephen didn't waver. I honor Moses by believing what he foretold, he had said. You worship the shadow, but the light has already come. Gasps rippled through the assembly. Another elder slammed his staff to the floor. The law is eternal. The law written on stone was only the beginning, Stephen's tone remained gentle but unyielding. Now God writes his new covenant on our hearts. The chamber erupted in shouts. Men argued over one another, the sound of sandals scraping and robes swishing as the Sanhedrin leaned forward in outrage. Even Saul's mentor had found no reply. Saul's fist clenched at the memory, the flush of humiliation, the tremor of fear that Stephen's words might be true. He had hated the man for that, hated the mirror of doubt he held up to them all. This man had to be silenced. And the council had shouted for his arrest. Witnesses were summoned who twisted Stephen's own words into crimes. Saul had followed as they dragged the man through the streets, the crowd hurling stones and curses before the gates even closed behind them. His stomach had churned, but his pride held firm. This was justice, he told himself. This was holy order. Yet when Stephen fell to his knees in the dust, smiling, unease rippled through Saul's certainty. The first stone struck with a dull, sickening thud. Saul flinched. Around him men bent together more stones, their faces lit with righteous fury. Saul's hand twitched toward the ground, but he froze. He couldn't do it. He felt sick. He looked around, realizing that the leaders would think he was a heretic as well. The eyes on him demanded agreement. So when someone handed him their outer cloak to hold, at least he accepted that. Then others started handing him theirs too, until the cloaks were stacked so high that he could barely see. He peered around them just in time to see Stephen's bloody face brighten when he suddenly exclaimed, "I see him! I see Jesus, and he's standing at the right hand of God." A chill ripped through Saul. His grip faltered, and for a moment he nearly dropped the pile of cloaks. But the pressure to conform to those around him made him force a yell out through his gritted teeth. "Blasphemer!" When the last stone fell silent and the dust began to settle, Stephen was still breathing. His lips moved faintly, whispering words that Saul could barely hear. Compelled, he took a step closer. "Lord," Stephen murmured, "do not hold this sin against them." Saul's pulse thundered in his ears. The air seemed to vanish and it was hard to breathe. But he blinked and the memory dissolved back into the present. The lamplight flickered. His hands trembled when he whispered aloud, "How could she know those words?" Saul drew a slow, shaking breath and pressed his palm flat against the table until the tremor stopped. Mercy was weakness. Doubt is rebellion. He wouldn't stumble again like that. Outside, Marcus waited, shifting uneasily as the last of the soldiers led Miriam's family down the narrow street. Neighbors peeked from doorways, then slammed their shutters closed. "See that the charges are carried out," Saul said, his voice cold and steady. Marcus hesitated. "Yes, my lord." Marcus lingered by the doorway long after the others had gone. The noise of boots and chains faded down the street, leaving only the soft whimper of the wind between the stones. He looked pale, his knuckles white around the spear. "My lord," he began quietly, "the children. Did they have to see it? Couldn't we have waited until they were out of the house?" Saul turned toward him, his expression unreadable. "They would still know when they came home to an empty house." Marcus swallowed. "Still, they're just children." "But children grow into their parents' faith," Saul said, and he strode off toward his quarters. By mid-morning, Saul's table was buried under scrolls, raids, confessions, temple reports, his reed scratched in relentless rhythm, pulling lines of ink across the parchment. A shadow darkened the doorway. "Enter," Saul said. A man stepped inside, bowing low. Saul wrinkled his nose at the smell of straw and animals that clung to him. "My lord, I trade doves and lambs in the outer court," he began, his voice trembling. "But since the Passover, business has fallen to nothing. They say they have no need of sacrifice. They claim their forgiveness has already been bought by the crucified one." Saul's reed stopped moving and he hissed through his teeth. "And you know who spreads this blasphemy?" "I do," the man said quickly. "They meet after dark, families, even merchants that I once trusted. If I can't sell my sacrificial animals, my children will starve. I'll have no way to feed them." Saul studied him for a long moment. "Then you'll name them," he said softly, dipping his pen, "one by one." Relief flashed across the man's face when the last name was said, and he bowed himself out. By midday, fresh reports arrived from the outer districts. Scroll after scroll told the same story of raids completed, leaders captured, homes emptied, and no resistance worth noting. Saul read each one with grim satisfaction. Order would be restored. Heresy would be silenced. For the first time in weeks, the city felt secure beneath his hand. He leaned back, his eyes tracing the scant light that spilled through the high window on this dreary, overcast day. This is what it means to serve God. Marcus appeared in the doorway again, dust streaking his armor. 3 more households, my lord, all taken without a struggle." Saul nodded, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "Good. The righteous stand firm, and the wicked will flee." When the next messenger left, Saul unrolled another report, but his eyes jumped straight to the hurried, scribbled script Someone had added at the bottom, "They sang hallelujah over and over as they were taken." When another messenger appeared in the doorway, Saul didn't rise. "Well," the man bowed low. "Reports from Caesarea, my lord. The movement grows there. Families gather in homes. Some merchants are refusing to sell for sacrifices, and some priests," he hesitated, "some priests have joined them." Saul's hand froze over the parchment. "Priests?" "Yes, my lord. They claim the law was fulfilled by the crucified one, and that his death replaced the old sacrifices, so their sins are already forgiven." The reed snapped in Saul's grip, and he tossed it across the room. "Blasphemy," he said flatly. "Everyone who speaks such words will answer for them." The messenger shifted. "It spreads faster than we can contain. For every arrest, there are 3 new gatherings. Some soldiers question the orders. They say that the heretics die praying." Saul's tone stayed even despite his growing anger. "Tell the captains to increase the searches. Anyone hesitating in duty will be replaced." The man bowed and left. Silence followed in the darkness of the overcast day, but in Saul's head, a voice from a debate several years ago echoed loudly. "You can kill his followers, but you'll never silence the one who conquered death," Stephen had said. "He didn't conquer death," Saul growled, as he knocked the ink and parchments off his table to the floor in one angry sweep. "He's dead now." The words echoed through the stone corridors long after his voice had fallen silent. Outside, clouds thickened, dimming the day to twilight. Meanwhile, Marcus walked quickly, dodging in behind market stalls and staying in shadows, carrying a small, tightly wrapped bundle in his arms. Behind him, 2 children followed close, their bare feet whispering against the stones. His wife looked from the bundle to him, then to the 2 frightened children standing behind him, before she gasped, "Marcus, what have you done?" He laid the bundle on the cot. The baby stirred, then settled again, its tiny fingers clutching at his sleeve. "They had no one," he said quietly. "But Saul will have you flogged if he finds out." Marcus only nodded as he looked out the window, watching another messenger sprinting down the street toward Saul's quarters, clutching a sealed letter in his hand. And that is the end of chapter 1. I forgot to tell you before I started that this is still a draft. It's not finished, it's not complete, and I already see some things in it that I'm going to tweak just a little bit. But this is, in general, this is the story. And it's going to continue from there. And you can see that while you know the story, or a lot of you will know the story, there is also things in here that are fiction that are being added to it that make more to the story so that you can see it like it is really happening while you're there. Or I hope that's what's happening anyway. So if you are interested in this, if you would like to see more or hear more, you can subscribe to my Facebook, follow it, and I will put that in the comments where you can do that. Also, you can, of course, subscribe to this channel and make sure to click the bell so you get a notification when I'm giving you a little more hint of what's going on. But I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know in the comments if you did. I don't even care if you give me constructive criticism in the comments. That's fine, too. Let me know what you think in the comments. But thank you very much, and I'll see you when I decide to share some more with you.